Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Anlu Keeve. Anlu, thank you for joining me on this, what seems to be a very dragging, slow, at least in Cape Town, hot Friday near the end of the year. It's one of those days when it's difficult to get stuff done, but thank you for being here.
It's nice to be back on twice in this week. And you forgot to add windy. I don't know where you are, whether it's windy or not, but it's king of the air on this side. So very windy.
Oh yeah, no, it's very windy here too. Oh yes, and thank you once again for hosting while I was brought low by my digestive system. But let's not dwell on that. Let's talk about what is going on in the country. And I think for me, the first two stories, and maybe even the third story we're going to be talking about here, is this sort of this feeling that so many of our leading figures in the ANC and in our politics, they really are just obsessed with status and symbols and all of that. So let's start off with the first story. There was some news yesterday that was reported by the SABC, and it caused a brief flurry of excitement as it was reported that the United States had reconsidered its participation in the G20. And there was all sorts of like chattering about this, and people were getting very excited on social media. President Ramaphosa, speaking at the G20, said that we were hoping the Americans would join us, and that the US has a right to participate in the G20. And as much as they notify us at the 11th hour, we still need to engage with them fully on what their participation at the 11th hour means and how it will manifest itself. And there was sort of all this excitement and crowing of, you see, the Americans couldn't stay away, they're coming home. Well, it was then clarified, apparently the SABC didn't actually bother to seek comment or clarity from the Americans when they reported this. What they were doing is they were sending, to be fair, their most senior diplomatic member in the country, the Charge d'Affaires, Mark Dillard, to accept the handover when the G20 summit is over, so that South Africans would be handing over the G20 presidency to someone, right, is the idea. This has apparently not gone down well with the president's office. President Cyril Ramaphosa, through his spokesperson, has said that he will not hand over the G20 presidency to the US Charge d'Affaires at the summit because the person is not sufficiently senior enough. Initially, when news of the US changing its mind and supposedly rejoining the G20 hit social media, the White House's Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly said on X, "Fake news," in response to this. And the Press Secretary Caroline Levitt said, "The United States is not participating in official talks in the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today. And that language is not appreciated by the president and his team. The representative of the Embassy of South Africa is simply there to recognize the United States will be the host of the G20. In response to the South African concern that the person doing the handover is too junior, a source on the American side said that it's disrespectful to the Charge d'Affaires to characterize him as a junior official. This is the senior foreign service officer, and it means you're basically, if you're looking at military ranks, he's the rank of general in the military. And as I said at the beginning, he is basically, at least within the country, the most senior diplomatic figure the Americans have. But Anlu, at this point, we're sort of, the president is kind of desperate to salvage some sort of great triumph from the G20, and it's just not kind of happening. The G20 is still going to be kind of important. We're going to have the many major world leaders there. We're going to have the Germans, the Indians, the British, a lot of important countries. South Africa will still have a chance to network with everyone. But it's clear to me, covering all these stories that we've been covering recently about the G20, that for the government, and particularly the ANC, this G20 thing is entirely almost about status and ego and posturing. it's not a recognition of South Africa's a growing position on the world stage. If anything, it's just been a demonstration of our shrinking. The only reason we have the G20 presidency is because it's a, we got in back in the day, and it's a rotating presidency, and it was just our turn. And we've been trying to turn this into some great crowning triumph like the World Cup was back in 2010. But it just ain't happening. And I get the sense that Ramaphosa is almost sort of standing around here going, I demand to be taken seriously. And I don't know, it just kind of comes off as, am I being uncharitable?
No. So last night short answer, no. Last night when the news broke of first the US coming and then the fake news tweet or X and Caroline Levitt saying that he ran his mouth, I literally felt like I'm sitting at a tennis match and it is like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just constantly between our government and the US government. Either the one saying, no, we do not think this is important, and the other one saying, no, but even though they're not coming, this is very important. So there's definitely a sense of the South African government. I mean, throughout the entire year, one of the biggest things that we've seen dominating the media is G20. Whether it is John Steenhuisen on the sidelines making in one of those meetings, setting up a memorandum with other countries on our agriculture, or all these. I think it's a series of 130 meetings that was held throughout the entirety of the year. But yeah, it's definitely dominated the media. And it's been made this wonderful big thing that is due to our own wonderfulness and our own abilities to lead these type of events and conversations. And I think that is a mischaracterization of the situation. As you've mentioned, it is a rotating chairmanship or presidency. This is simply our turn to host it. And the whole idea of the G20 is to have some sort of consensus. So we are yet to see whether there will be the big declaration. I suspect that we will see it instead of just retreating back to the chairman's declaration, I think it's called, where just essentially Cyril says that these are the things that has been discussed and these are the things that we put forward as the important items on the agenda, and that instead of an actual declaration that is signed and agreed by all the parties in the G20. So definitely the government making a very, very big thing out of it. I think if we look at some of the things that they've done over this last week, at least, my social media feed has been dominated by videos of Johannesburg just being cleaned up, homeless people being removed, bright orange pots being placed in the roads. Obviously, we've seen all the billboards being put up by all sorts of organizations, and the government obviously trying to take down whichever of those they do not quite agree with. But the point stands that they've been cleaning up and making a big spectacle of it, which it is a spectacle in the sense that it is an opportunity for South African businesses to showcase what they have. But that's not quite what happens when the government simply puts orange pots out. It is an opportunity for South African businesses to show the world over this coming weekend. I mean, there will be delegates and delegations from across the world, 42 countries in South Africa. It is an opportunity for South African businesses to put their name out there. But I don't think that is the priority of the government. I get the sense that government is more phased by how they will look at the end of it, and how government or how the rest of the world perceives our reaction to the US. And I think on that point, our reaction to the US, it's incredibly difficult to anticipate Trump's next move. You also mentioned in our pre-show discussion that we think this might have been a bit of a in the whim response, not sending anybody to South Africa. But I do think it's difficult to anticipate his next move. Our best bet would be to keep our emotions under control and to try and figure out what is the underlying thing that he's trying to say. What is the actual issues he has with us and with our policies, and then negotiate from there on. I think there's nothing for us to win in, because I don't know if you saw the article, whether it's this specific one or another one, that said essentially Cyril explaining how, yes, they would like to come now, but we need to see whether it's practical, and there's agendas that need to be set, and who speaks and when they speak. And I just thought to myself, America wants to attend, and you are worried about setting the agenda and who has to speak and who doesn't have to speak, even if they are just sending their, just obviously I'm saying it just, but sending their chants. And I will not be attempting the French pronunciation, so please do excuse me. But yeah, so no, I get the same sense that you do. This is about the image it creates and not about what South Africa can actually gain from it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating watching this saying, oh, we're not going to accept the handover. Just, I mean, if I was setting the strategy for Ramaphosa and, I decided that I didn't actually want to, actually make any concessions to the Americans, just don't make a big deal out of it. If you make a big deal out of it, you're just going to invite some sort of new response, and all the attention of your supposedly glorious, wonderful, shimmering G20 summit is just going to be consumed by this question of the US and South Africa's relationship, which is, exactly what you don't want if you're Ramaphosa. So, like, this just speaks of kind of hurt pride and feelings dictating policy. I mean, look, I guess the whole reason I'm also sort of so dismissive of all of this is because I just generally think that things like the G20 aren't as important. You get all these important people in a room together, and you're probably going to have some important networking that goes on and all of that. But at the end of the day, I just don't rate them as particularly vital forums. And that's the sort of bottom line of this: is what is South Africa going to gain from this? If we had some sort of true diplomatic core, and we had business-friendly policies, and we had, genuinely efficient government in our cities, in Joburg in particular, we could potentially say, well, we're actually going to show off, get some good media, and then hopefully spin that in the future. Spin that in the future into some sort of actual tangible win. But we all know what's going to happen here. There's going to be some pomp and circumstance. There's going to be some sort of declarations. There's going to be interviews given where the G20 is described as a great success. I'm sure various countries that attend will say nice things about South Africa, and then they'll go away, and that'll be the last we think about it for the next, 20 years or however long. It's all about status, and to me, it all seems to be about, the ANC government desperately trying to prove that it still is important on the world stage when it just isn't. And we've seen this reflexive in some of the stories you've covered on this previously, defensiveness about the G20. And I think it's because for the ANC, foreign policy has always been the safety blanket. That whenever things are going wrong at home, you clutch to foreign policy and you do something that makes your revolutionary spirit feel good for a while. You take Israel to the international court, or you denounce the West as evil imperialists or something like that, and it makes you feel good for just a little bit. And I think the G20 was all part of that, trying to keep that psychological force field intact. But it ain't working. And I don't know. Any more thoughts on this one before we move on?
I think we've mentioned this quite a few times, specifically on the show, is that Cyril does see this as his legacy. This is the big thing that he's leaving behind. He was president of the G20, and he brought all these 42 countries together, and they've signed this wonderful declaration about what solidarity and equity or equality and sustainability, I think, is the third word. I can't exactly recall now, but
it's like buzzwords.
Ooh, very, very cool. So no, I think he sees this as his legacy. This is his baby. And there's so many other things at on the domestic front that has failed. That this is the one big thing that they are trying to pull through and at least just kind of get over the doorstep. It does feel like there's a whole lot trying to pull them back, rightfully so, I think. But yeah, this is his legacy, the legacy that he's trying to leave behind. Unfortunately, as you said, I agree. I think it's a legacy of status and not, listen, this is the foundation, the strong foundation that I've now built for the South African people to build their businesses and to have these bilateral agreements and to showcase their abilities to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, this has turned into just, listen, ooh, look at what I've done. Very unfortunate.
And I think it's a good opportunity right now. Sorry to harp on this, but Cyril Ramaphosa's real legacy could have been actually turning the country around. When he defeated Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma in that ANC internal conference, he was the most popular politician in the country by a long way, and still is, although not by a long way anymore. And he could have told the ANC, look, you either get in line with me or I will leave you behind. He was more popular than the party. And he would have had he had a key moment of heavy political capital. And what was it spent on? It was spent on mollifying ANC factions and advancing the National Democratic Revolution further and just doubling down on every idiotic mistake that got us into this difficult place that we're in now. And as a result, Ramaphosa's legacy will be one of total failure to uplift the country in any meaningful way, despite the opportunity he had before him. And that is, I think, the reality here. No one is going to remember the G20. He's wasted what was a gift to him to genuinely take the country in a different direction. But it failed. By his own
and I mean, if you think of Cyril, at least I think, thought of him for a long time in almost the eyes of he's a cupcake. He's the reform bearer almost. I know there was obviously that time of Ramaphosa, which we've now come to our senses, but he had that political capital and he completely extended it on the wrong things.
So Cyril has no one to blame for this but himself. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about our next story. And there's some similar themes in this one here. There's been this hubbub over the past couple of days, weeks, that Cyril Ramaphosa was sort of imminently about to resign. And it's been kind of clear for a while that Ramaphosa is not exactly really enjoying his presidency that much. But nonetheless, there's all these sort of persistent rumors that maybe he's going to resign after the G20 because that's going to be the sort of capstone of his legacy, and then he's going to fly off into the wild blue yonder so that he can leave the country to its fate or whatever, without anything else going wrong. And these rumors got so persistent that Cyril Ramaphosa appears to have been driven to actually make a statement against some ANC members of the National Executive Committee. ANC ministers, there were apparently some ANC ministers who were driving this narrative and telling people that Ramaphosa was imminently about to resign because they are upset at being demoted to deputy positions. This is according to reporting from News 24. Speaking to the NEC on Sunday, Ramaphosa challenged these ANC members to confront him directly at a specific time and date rather than spreading rumors that he's about to resign. So I think we can put the rumors that he's about to resign to rest. Apparently, according to the reporting, a bunch of former ministers who are now deputy ministers are kind of leading the charge. You've got the former Communications and Technologies Minister, Mondli Gugubele, the former Minister of Health, Joe Patla, the former Public Works and Infrastructure Minister, Sihle Zikalala. And apparently these guys are all very upset that they've been demoted, and this is why they're trying to get rid of Ramaphosa. In fact, some of them are extra upset now that they have a DA minister above them, which they believe to be extra insulting. And once again, Anlu, we see here this kind of theme of status and privilege, and I demand to be taken seriously. What's your take on this one? Am I downplaying it? Do you think there really was a real push to get Ramaphosa to resign, or do you think this was just sort of rumor mills?
No. Well, I can't say whether there was a real push. I think this is just maybe if we extend the narrative of status and constantly looking for status and rank, it's something that we've seen within the ANC. So I would not put it past these ministers to also have been the end goal for them, and it being their way of getting back at people. I think it's important to, like, ministers are constantly at, no position is fixed. There can be a reshuffle at any time. And I mean, it's not really anything personal.
Sorry to
even,
interrupt. A point which the ANC went at lengths to say when they fired a DA deputy minister for, really not very good reasons.
I apologize for constantly blowing my nose to the guests, but it's flu season, although it's summer. Yeah, exactly. They've been going to lengths to get that point across. And yeah, I really don't think whoever is in politics and takes these type of things, particularly this situation, I think, personal, I think you should grow a bit of a thicker skin. I think if you were genuinely in your position to do an actual job and to do a good job at that, to drive your department, you'd be willing to kind of work under a DA minister if they are to get the job done. Many of these ministers have experience in the departments and have at least ministerial experience, whether it's not necessarily in their specific department, or the mandate of that department. They understand what it means to be a minister. And for them to actually, we've mentioned in the pre-show discussion, the ANC constantly says that they are here to serve, like they are here to kind of, it's a civil service being a minister. For you to moan about being deputized, I hope that's the correct next step of being a deputy, being made a deputy. For you to be now made a deputy definitely does not mean that Cyril has something personal against you. I think you are supposed to be able to do your job wherever you are, and do it to the best of your abilities. And then there's really not that big of a difference between how much a minister gets paid and how much a deputy gets paid. So if you really are in it to do your job, then you'd kind of be able to still do your job and drive the mandate of the department as a deputy minister, which just emphasizes this point that they are in it for the status. They are in it for that ministerial position, and the title of it. So I definitely, I'm to some extent, I'm happy that Cyril kind of said, like, listen, okay, give me a date. Because it seems like there's a little bit of backbone coming through. I'm not sure whether we should mistake it for an actual backbone and let one good step mislead us. But it does seem like there's a little bit of a backbone shining through, which is refreshing to see. And of course, I think when we consider Cyril's actual, like, if we consider whether Cyril will actually resign, I don't see that happening. I think he'll probably see through his term, at least as president of the country, like head of state. We obviously have in December the get together. What is it called again? I keep forgetting it's at Nasrec.
The ANC has a conference. I can't remember its name.
Yes,
but it's
they call their big conference.
Halfway to the elective conference. It's sort of the halfway point.
Exactly.
The general meeting or something.
The last one was in December 2020. And obviously now they'll have to reevaluate essentially the top 7 and they will be evaluated according to the agenda or the points, the to-do list that was set during their term or at that 2020 conference. And of course, as we know, there's been a lot that happened since that conference, including the formation of the GNU. So there's an important question to ask. Will they evaluate these top 7 leaders in the ANC structures considering the GNU as a positive thing or considering the GNU as a negative thing? And obviously the factions, they will have to, there's a balance that will need to take place. I think for Cyril specifically, I'm anticipating at least a lot more talk about expropriation and NHI and race in the coming months, particularly for the reason that he is evaluated according to many of those things. And I say that because we know that Mbeki, for example, was obviously a good manager of the country, but a bad manager of ANC policies. And Zuma was a bad manager of the country, but a better, more streetwise manager of ANC policy. And Cyril obviously has that balancing task. So, yeah, I don't think he will resign next week, though.
Yeah, you know, as I said to you in the pre-show discussion, the one sort of also questions the sort of larger plan of some of these guys who are pushing for Cyril's resignation. Cyril is the only thing holding up the ANC's electoral numbers, right? He's actually now sort of about as popular as the ANC. So in that SRF poll that came out this week, Ramaphosa's approval rating is 38%, and the ANC is, polling at about 37% on a 53% turnout model. Every single other ANC leader is like 20% approval or lower, which means they're all less popular than even the leaders of the DA, Helen Ziller and John Steenhuisen. So what exactly is the plan here? Force Cyril to resign, and then what are you going to do when the local government elections come? When the ANC already looks like it's going to take a beating, you're going to fire your most popular political leader? It's just like, it's sort of like, step one, get Cyril to resign. Step two, question mark. Step three, profit. The ANC doesn't seem to have a plan here. And, electing Paul Mashatile, I do not think is going to rescue them from their current situation. Anyway, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I think I agree with your latter point. Who are they? What is the next step? Are they considering this? And that's the thing. Many of these ministers, I'm assuming, is acting out of rage, and it essentially makes them very short-sighted. And that's the risk, obviously, in politics. If you take quick actions to act on how you feel at the moment, you are obviously being very short-sighted. And there is no real long-term interest of the ANC is to keep Cyril in as long as possible. He is the most popular person in the country at the moment. And it's best for them, considering the future of the ANC at least, it's best for them to keep him in his current position.
Yeah, exactly.
As president. Yeah.
So this, I'm going to take revenge because I've been denied patronage is, you know what you can't be if your party disintegrates entirely. You can't even be a deputy minister. You get to be an MP if you're lucky. Anyway, let's go on to our last story. Speaking of disintegrating ANC stuff, ever since the EFF broke away from the ANC Youth League essentially went with them, right? Like, this was where Julius Malema made his name, and he's sort of entirely seems to have taken that infrastructure with him. And so the ANC Youth League has been in a complete state of disrepair since then. It doesn't seem to have had any real impact. I mean, how big is it? Can it hold meetings? Who knows? And yet, despite the position it's in, it's decided that it still has just enough life left in it to have an internal battle with itself. And there's reporting that the ANC Youth League has now suspended its president, Colin Malachi, who has been, letter signed by the Secretary General, suspended from the ANC Youth League. because he apparently unilaterally convened a parallel meeting and misled all of our structures in terms of his role as president. And this is because he held a meeting that excluded the Secretary General and the Treasurer General. Anlu, there's a point where when political organizations, or really any kind of organization, reaches a sort of terminal death spiral, they start to fight with each other, even though there's nothing to fight over. If you've ever seen a disintegrating residents association or one of those like very small far leftist Trotskyist parties or something like that, they reach a point where they're so unimportant that everyone just starts tearing each other apart. And it really feels like the ANC League has reached that position. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It almost reminds me of this image where it's just like everybody's just grabbing onto something that is just withering away. And yeah, the Youth League has definitely been plagued, I almost want to call it, by just internal division and power struggles within it. I recall seeing a couple, I can't remember when it was, but a while ago, seeing a couple of chats about like internal group chats where they just go at each other, and it's all these back and forth conversations about you said this and you said that. And yeah, so definitely seeing a lot of like a strong trend of organizational collapse. And there's obviously, as you mentioned, went down with the ANC. They've been struggling to have their conferences on time. And yeah, just kind of, I don't know why they are trying to continuing to breathe air into something that's just withering away. Critics have argued that the league, well, I have seen some critics at least argue that the league has shifted its focus away from this almost mobilizing the masses. And obviously, as the name says, youth, what will you call it? Let's use our buzzwords, championing youth issues, to just essentially being a platform for these people who once again are just looking for patronage and to somehow think that this is a platform that can give them power, and where they can secure future roles for themselves within the ANC. It's almost this perception that it is a get-rich-quick scheme. I mean, it's your way into the ANC as well, or the higher-ranking ANC, the big ANC. Let's call it the big league ANC then, if you want to. And then, of course, I think it's just, this is kind of the point, like what happens if there's no independence within structures. They, like the league's relationship with the parent body or the ANC, then it's just like, it's not healthy. And you really can't expect an organization like this for the goals, at least that it intended, to actually act on those if there's constant politics running through trickling down from obviously the ANC structures as well. So I don't see this going anywhere. I'm happy that they had a conference, but yeah, there's no hope for this.
Yeah, no, and at the end of the day, what is the ANC Youth League offering people? Is it a more radical ANC? Well, you've already got that. It's called the EFF. Is it a more youth-focused ANC? Well, no, because that would, to actually improve the position of young people in this country, you'd need to adopt different policies from the ANC that are radically different, not just slightly different, not just more socialism, which is basically what the EFF promises, but, something more in the direction of actually increasing employment for young people. But you can't do that either, because that would be...
Yeah. What is their distinctive feature? What are they actually offering? Sorry. What are they actually offering?
Exactly. Yeah. And look, to be honest, I think that youth leagues in general, all political parties, are kind of silly. Like, there is no... yes, young people do have kind of particular problems and economic things and all of that. But like, at the end of the day, youth politics is like the laziest form of identity politics. Everyone was young once, and so everyone is a member. I've always thought that they're a bit, silly. When I was in the DA, for example, I never joined a DA youth league because I was like, why? Anyway.
And I think it kind of breeds, like it's breeding ground for career politicians. And are those the best kind of politicians? Perhaps they are very good diplomats, but are they really the type of people? Do you not want somebody who has some industry experience to run a department or to head these organizations? And obviously just the like, particularly to the ANC Youth League, they've just completely lost their credibility. There's, recall some corruption allegations, I think, also coming out of them. Just no credibility at all.
Indeed. Anyway, sorry I've been a bit all sort of over the place today. Maybe being a bit more whinging than usual. It's been a long week and a long year, so we're almost through it. I do apologize to any listeners. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Anlu, for being on today for the second time this week. Always appreciated. And I hope that absolutely everyone has a fantastic weekend. And we shall see you, well, not bright and early, but we shall see you on Monday for the next Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone, and have an absolutely fantastic and wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.